This arrest made George's sexuality public, but instead of hiding, he embraced it. In 2007, George admitted that hiding for so long had made him feel like a fraud. He also believed that the arrest happened because deep down he wanted to be free. However, the scandal followed him for years. And it wasn't the last time he made headlines for the wrong reasons: drugs, danger, and time behind bars. In 2006, George was accused again of public sex, this time in Hampstead Heath, London. He didn't deny it. He simply said it wasn't an issue between him and Kenny, his partner at the time. The same year, he was arrested for having Class C drugs. He called it "my own stupid fault" and was let off with a warning. Then, in 2007, he was found asleep at a traffic light and charged with drug-impaired driving. He was banned from driving for 2 years and had to do more community service. A year later, he was caught again in Hampstead Heath with drugs in a public bathroom. This time, he was cautioned for having Class A and C drugs. Things got worse in 2010. George crashed his car into a shop called Snappy Snaps in North London. It happened just after he returned from a pride parade. CCTV showed the whole thing. Police arrested him for being unfit to drive. He later admitted that he had been using cannabis and taking a strong antidepressant called amitriptyline. He pleaded guilty in court and was sentenced to 8 weeks in prison, a fine, and a 5-year driving ban. He served 4 weeks before being released. After the crash, someone even wrote the word "wham" in the dent left in the shop's wall, making a sad moment feel even more surreal. All these incidents showed that George was fighting more than just fame. He was battling his own demons. Some days he laughed it off, and other days he faced the consequences head on. But behind the headlines and courtrooms, there was a man who had loved deeply, lost painfully, and lived a complicated life under the spotlight. Struggles behind the fame. For many years, George Michael battled with drug use. His problem started showing in public when he was arrested for drug-related issues in 2006, 2008, and again in 2010. He openly talked about smoking too much cannabis. In a 2007 interview on BBC Radio 4's Desert Island Discs, he admitted, "I wish I could smoke less." By 2009, in an interview with The Guardian, George revealed he had cut down, but even then, he was still smoking 7 or 8 joints a day. Before that, it had been up to 25 a day. He also used sleeping pills, which made things worse. His lifestyle was taking a toll on his body, and over time, it showed. But drugs weren't the only issue. In 2011, things got serious when George canceled a concert at the Royal Albert Hall. Because he felt unwell, just a few days later, in Vienna, he was rushed to the hospital after chest pains. He was supposed to perform that night, but instead, doctors found he had pneumonia. His condition got worse overnight, and he had to be moved to intensive care. At one point, he even slipped into a coma. It was a scary time. George needed a tracheotomy to help him breathe. Thankfully, after nearly a month in the hospital, he recovered and was sent home on December 21st. He later said that the doctors had saved my life, and promised to perform a free concert for them as a thank you. After the coma, something strange happened. George spoke with a different accent. For a short while, he had a West Country English accent, which led to concerns that he might have developed something called foreign accent syndrome. That worry faded, but his health problems were far from over. Scars that never fully healed. In 2013, George was in a car accident on the M1 motorway near St. Albans. He suffered a head injury and had to be airlifted to a hospital. His team later said the injuries were not too serious, but it was another sign that his health was fragile. By 2014, George claimed he had stayed off cannabis for about a year and a half. That sounded like a good step forward. But in 2015, he quietly checked himself into a drug rehab center in Switzerland. That it was clear he was trying to get better, trying to fight the demons that had followed him for years. But as one close friend said later, he had some issues at the end of his life, but he always had a good heart. Despite everything, George kept believing in helping others. Kenny Goss, his former partner, shared how George would often say things like, "Who needs to be a damn billionaire when people are starving?" If George didn't have the money to donate, he'd simply say, "Borrow the damn money. I can always make more money. I'm a talented man." That kind of thinking showed who George really was. He wasn't just a pop star. He was someone who truly cared about others. But even that big heart couldn't save him from what came next. The day the music stopped, it was Christmas morning, December 25, 2016. George was in his home in Goring-on-Thames, a peaceful village in South Oxfordshire. His boyfriend, Fadi Fawaz, had been waiting to wake him up, but something wasn't right. Fadi said he had tried to wake George for over an hour. He thought maybe he was just sleeping in, but when he touched him, George felt cold. His skin had turned blue. That's when Fadi called emergency services. In the 911 call, Fadi told the operator, "He's cold. He's blue." The person on the line asked if this was expected. Fadi answered, No. I've been waiting for him to wake up for hours, and he wouldn't wake up. He's gone. You know he's not there. It was a moment that broke hearts around the world. George Michael was only 53 years old. His sudden death shocked fans everywhere. People couldn't believe it. For weeks, no one really knew what had happened. At first, the police called his death unexplained, but not suspicious. An autopsy was done, but the results were not clear. That led to more testing and more questions. But months later, the final report came out and it gave the answers the world had been waiting for. The coroner said George died of natural causes, but the health conditions he had were serious. He had dilated cardiomyopathy, which means his heart's left ventricle was too stretched and weak to pump blood properly. He also had myocarditis, an infection that causes swelling in the heart. On top of that, he suffered from fatty liver disease. These three conditions together were enough to take his life. Fatty liver can be caused by alcohol, but also by being overweight or having diabetes. The heart issues made everything more dangerous. His body simply couldn't fight anymore. The coroner released a statement that said, as there is a confirmed natural cause of death, the investigation is being discontinued and there is no need for an inquest. George's death was final, but his legacy was not. Fans around the world held tributes. His music returned to the charts. His friends and family spoke about his kindness, his giving nature, and the deep pain he often kept inside. Fadi posted on social media after the death, "It's a Christmas I will never forget, finding your partner dead peacefully in bed first thing in the morning. I will never stop missing you." The man who once ruled the airwaves, filled stadiums, and gave the world unforgettable songs, had died alone, quietly on Christmas morning. Speaking of which, in the days leading up to George Michael's death, he was working on a deeply personal documentary called George Michael, Freedom. This documentary later aired nearly a year after his passing and gave fans one last glimpse into his state of mind, his last known words and emotional reflections. In the documentary, George opened up about his grief, especially after losing his first love, Anselmo Filippa, and later his mother, Leslie. He called those years the darkest time of his life. He explained, "From the day I found out about my partner to the day I can say I was on the mend from my mother, it was just constant fear. It was either fear of death or fear of the next bereavement." He also said something that many fans couldn't forget, "I felt like I'd been picked on by the gods." It was clear he had been carrying heavy pain for years. He had faced loss, loneliness, and deep sadness, all while the world watched him as a superstar. What were his exact last words? No one knows for sure. George was believed to be alone on the night of Christmas Eve. His boyfriend, Fadi Fawaz, later said, "I never saw him. I fell asleep in my car and I never saw him that night." George Michael died sometime that night, quietly and unexpectedly. But that quiet goodbye led to loud questions, and many people weren't ready to let go without answers. Why people questioned his death? From the moment news broke of George Michael's passing on Christmas Day 2016, the public began asking what really happened. He was just 53 years old and had been keeping a low profile. Some fans believed that his history with drugs may have played a part. In 2008, George had been arrested for drug possession. That same year, in an interview with The Guardian, he admitted that he had been smoking crack cocaine and still smoked at least 7 marijuana joints a day. In 2010, after a car crash that led to jail time, George said something had finally clicked. "I realized it had to be something to do with me. It shook me out of my denial," he explained. He also said he began drug counseling and went through detox, but he didn't make that public at the time. Still, not everyone believed his struggles were fully behind him. His childhood friend, Andros Giorgio, shared a different story. He claimed George had let hard drugs back in his life and believed that George had accidentally taken too much. Giorgio said it might have been a mix of illegal drugs, antidepressants, and alcohol. He also suspected that Fawaz may have had a role in George's death, though no proof was ever shared. The Thames Valley Police were quick to step in. They said clearly that the death was unexplained but not suspicious. But the rumors didn't stop. There the controversy around tweets and speculation. As fans looked for answers, more confusion began to surface, this time online. From Fadi Fawaz's Twitter account, a set of shocking tweets appeared. One of them read, "The only thing George wanted is to die." Another tweet claimed that George had tried to kill himself many times and finally he managed. The tweet spread fast, but Fawaz soon responded saying his account had been hacked. He told the Mirror, "I am shocked with what's going on with the Twitter thing. My account has been hacked and closed." He said he never wrote those things, but by then the damage had been done. Many people started to wonder if George had taken his own life. With his past struggles, the idea didn't seem impossible to some, but there was no real evidence. As rumors grew, George's family made it clear they would not be part of any guessing game. In a public statement, they said, "The family remained devastated by his passing and have no wish to comment in relation to any such speculation, whether current or in the future." It was their way of protecting his memory. No matter what the public said, they wanted peace. Months passed with no clear answers, but eventually the truth came through. It was in March 2017 when the coroner gave the final report. George Michael had died of natural causes. His death was due to 3 serious health issues: dilated cardiomyopathy, myocarditis, and fatty liver disease. Dilated cardiomyopathy is a condition where the heart's left ventricle becomes enlarged and can't pump blood properly. Myocarditis is inflammation of the heart, often caused by infection. Fatty liver disease is the buildup of fat in the liver, and it can be caused by alcohol but also other health problems. So despite all the rumors, the truth was simple. George died from health complications. No drugs, no foul play, no suicide, just a tired body that could no longer fight. Once that news was released, many fans felt both heartbroken and relieved. The questions had ended, and the mourning could begin. The world responded with love. Stars like Elton John, Madonna, and Ellen DeGeneres all shared their sadness. James Corden revealed that George was the reason carpool karaoke was born. Melissa Etheridge said George's beautiful voice and his beautiful music were such a gift. People in his neighborhood came together. They placed flowers, teddy bears, candles, and cards outside his home. They said he had been a kind neighbor who walked his dogs and sometimes attended Christmas Eve Mass. One neighbor said, "George employed really decent people and treated them with respect. He regarded them as part of the family and was kind and generous to them." His publicist added, "For someone whose life was ultimately about his music and the love he had for his family and friends, his fans, and the world at large, there could be no more fitting tribute." And Fadi Fawaz, the man who found him that morning, shared his grief on Instagram. "I will never stop missing you, George, the kind and the most beautiful man ever." From all the pain, rumors, and loss, what stood strong was George Michael's legacy. He had lived through so much, but still gave the world his heart through music. Even in silence, his voice continues to be heard. The legacy George Michael left behind. George Michael's true kindness was something many people only learned about after he died. Throughout his life, he quietly gave to those in need. He donated to many charities, performed free shows for nurses, and even worked at a homeless shelter without seeking attention. One story that touched many hearts was about a woman trying to have a baby. George saw her on a talk show talking about her struggle with IVF. He sent her money without revealing who he was. Later, when she sadly had a miscarriage, he sent her flowers. But when she finally had a baby girl, he celebrated with her and only then told her it was him who helped. Elton John, during a tribute in 2017, said, "He was the kindest, most generous man, and did it without wanting any publicity. I'll miss him so much for his music, but more than anything for his humanity." Of course, his music also lives on. From Wham to his solo hits, George's songs are still loved across the world. His music even inspired the movie Last Christmas. In 2023, he was honored by being added to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Andrew Ridgeley, his bandmate and longtime friend, said George would have been proud. "He was a supernova in a sky full of stars," Ridgeley said. "He was probably the finest singing voice and songwriter of his generation." In 2024, Ridgeley returned to the snowy village in Switzerland where they filmed the Last Christmas video. He said being there again felt incomplete because Yog wasn't with us. Using George's childhood nickname, Still, he shared, "Now we can remember Yog at Christmas positively. A soft, lasting memory of a man who gave the world his music and so much more." What's the one George Michael song that still touches your heart today? Did you know about his secret acts of kindness before this video? What surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time. He had it all: fame, fortune, and a voice the world loved. George Michael was more than just a pop star. He was a global superstar, a heartthrob, and a true music legend. From Wham to solo success, he ruled the charts for decades. But behind the lights and the hits, George lived a life filled with heartbreak, secrets, and personal battles. His sudden death shocked the world, alone on Christmas Day. And what followed sparked even more questions. Why was he so alone? What really happened in those final hours? Now, years later, his family has finally spoken. Join us as we uncover the truth about George Michael's death and see what his family has finally revealed. A boy named Georgios. George Michael was born as Georgios Kyriakos Panayiotou on June 25, 1963, in East Finchley, London. He was the youngest of 3 children and the only son. His father, Jack Panayiotou, came from Cyprus and ran a restaurant. His mother, Leslie, was an English dancer. George's childhood was spent in a normal house in Kingsbury, a quiet part of London. He went to Roe Green Junior School and later Kingsbury High School. He had 2 sisters, Yoda and Melanie. George was close to his family, especially his mother. In fact, later in life, he once shared how his grandmother on his mother's side was Jewish, but she never told anyone because she was afraid during World War II. That fear stayed with the family for years. At the age of 8, George had an accident and hurt his head. Strangely, this injury sparked something in him. He later said it was after this moment that his love for music truly began. But he never thought he would become a star. Not yet. Things started to change when the family moved to a new town called Radlett. George then joined a new school, Bushy Mead School, and that's where everything took a turn. The start of Wham! At Bushy Mead School, George met a boy named Andrew Ridgely. The two sat next to each other and became friends quickly. They both had one dream: to become musicians. George had even started busking in the London Underground, singing songs by bands like Queen. Before Wham!, George played music at restaurants and school parties. He also worked as a DJ. He was always around music, even before anyone knew his name. For a short time, he and Andrew formed a ska band called The Executive with a few other friends, but it didn't last. Then, in 1981, Wham! Was born. George also changed his name legally to George Michael, a name the world would never forget. The first album, Fantastic, came out in 1983 and shot to #1 in the UK. It had fun, catchy songs like Young Guns, Wham Rap, and Club Tropicana. But their second album, Make It Big, made George and Andrew international stars. The hit, Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, topped the charts in both the UK and the US. Other hits like Freedom, Everything She Wants, and Careless Whisper followed. Careless Whisper was George's first solo hit and reached #1 in almost 25 countries. In December 1984, Wham! Released Last Christmas, a song that still plays every holiday season. That same year, George joined Band Aid's charity single, Do They Know It's Christmas? Then in 1985, he sang at Live Aid, a massive concert watched by millions. And that was just the beginning. Fame and struggles. George's solo career took off in 1987 with the album Faith. It won a Grammy and sold over 25 million copies worldwide. His voice, style, and songwriting made him a global superstar. Over the years, he released many hit albums like Listen Without Prejudice, Older, Patience, and 2-5. He gave the world unforgettable songs like Faith, Father Figure, One More Try, Freedom 90, and Jesus to a Child. George once said, I still believe that music is one of the most beautiful gifts we've been given. His songs touched millions of hearts, but George's life was not always easy. In 1998, he came out as gay. That same year, he was arrested for public lewdness, and it made headlines. He later became a strong voice for LGBT rights and worked to raise money for HIV and AIDS causes. He struggled with drug issues and was arrested more than once, but his fans never left his side. They stood by him through every headline and every scandal. In 2005, the documentary, A Different Story, showed a personal side of George's life and career. Then came his 25 Live Tour, which ran from 2006 to 2008. It was a huge success. But in 2011 he fell seriously ill and ended up in a coma because of pneumonia. Thankfully, he recovered and performed his final concert in 2012 at London's Earl's Court. On Christmas Day in 2016, the world woke up to heartbreaking news. George Michael had died at the age of 53. He passed away alone in his home in Oxfordshire. George had 10 #1 hits in the US and 13 in the UK. He won 2 Grammys, 3 Brit Awards, and 12 Billboard Music Awards. He was also listed among the 200 greatest singers by Rolling Stone, and Billboard named him one of the greatest Hot 100 artists of all time. The Radio Academy called him the most played artist on UK radio between 1984 and 2004. And yet, with all the fame and love he received, George's final years were filled with silence, mystery, and pain. George Michael and his hidden truth. George Michael's journey with his sexuality wasn't easy. As a teenager, he believed he was straight because his first crushes were on women. But during puberty, he started to realize that his real feelings were for men. At 19, he told his close friend Andrew Ridgely that he was bisexual. He also told one of his sisters, but he kept it hidden from his parents. In 1998, after being outed, George spoke openly in an interview with Parkinson. He said he finally accepted that he was gay after falling in love with a man. Later in The Advocate, he explained, it was falling in love with a man that ended my conflict over bisexuality. He also shared, I never had a moral problem with being gay. But when I fell in love with a man, I realized none of the women I loved before were real love. Even though he had relationships with women in the past, George said he could never imagine a future with them. He added, I used to sleep with women quite a lot in the Wham days, but never felt it could develop into a relationship. I was emotionally a gay man. He stopped sleeping with women during the AIDS crisis because he didn't want to hide the truth anymore. He also believed that his sexuality may have been shaped by his environment. He said his father was always working, and he became very close to his mother. That closeness, he thought, had a role in how he felt. But he also admitted that for some people, being gay is something they are born with, no matter the environment. The fear of hurting his mother was one of the reasons he kept his truth hidden for so long. But when he finally accepted it, his life changed and so did his relationships. Love, loss, and deep pain. George had a few important relationships in his life. One of them was with Kathy Chung, a makeup artist. She even appeared in his music video for I Want Your Sex. Kathy was considered his muse at the time. George later said she was the only woman he ever truly dated and that she knew about his bisexuality. After his death, Kathy called him a true friend and said they had shared some of the best times of her life. But the love that changed him completely was with a Brazilian dress designer named Anselmo Felipe. They met in 1991 at the Rock in Rio concert. 6 months later, Anselmo told George he had HIV. George was terrified, not just because of the illness, but because his own family didn't know he was gay, and he didn't know how to tell them. In 1993, Anselmo died from a brain hemorrhage related to AIDS. George was heartbroken. He wrote the song Jesus to a Child for him. He also dedicated the album Older to Anselmo. Later in 2008, George said, "It was a terribly depressing time. It took about 3 years to grieve. Then after that, I lost my mother. I felt almost like I was cursed." The loss didn't stop George from loving again. In 1996, he started a long-term relationship with Kenny Goss, a former flight attendant from Texas. The couple had homes in Dallas, London, and Oxfordshire. They had planned to register their civil partnership in the UK, but it was postponed due to media pressure in George's tours. In 2011, George announced that they had actually split 2 years earlier. His last known relationship was with Fadi Foss, a hairstylist and photographer. Fadi was the one who found George's body on Christmas morning in 2016. But before that final moment, George had lived through many public struggles. The public scandal. In April 1998, George Michael was arrested in a public restroom in Beverly Hills for engaging in a lewd act. It was a sting operation by an undercover police officer named Marcelo Rodriguez. George later joked in an interview, "I got followed into the restroom and then this cop started playing this game, which I think is called, I'll show you mine. You show me yours. And then when you show me yours, I'm going to arrest you." After pleading no contest, George was fined and ordered to do 80 hours of community service. Not long after, he released the music video for Outside, which made fun of the incident by showing men dressed as policemen kissing. Rodriguez sued George for $10 million, claiming the video and interviews had mocked him. The case was dismissed, then reopened, but in the end, the court said Rodriguez couldn't win emotional damages because he was a public officer.